The accidental discovery captain, Marcus Reed, stared at the navigation display with growing concern. The numbers made no sense. 3 weeks ago, the exploration vessel New Horizon had been conducting a routine survey mission in the Outer Rim territories. Now they were completely lost in uncharted space, their navigation systems scrambled by what the science team called quantum interference patterns. The bridge of the New Horizon buzzed with quiet activity. Lieutenant Sarah Chen worked frantically at the communications console, trying to establish contact with Earth Command. Dr. James Harrison, their lead scientist, hunched over sensor readings that defied every law of physics he thought he understood. Chief Engineer Rodriguez emerged from the maintenance shaft, wiping grease from his hands and shaking his head grimly. "Captain, the drive systems are still operational, but something in this region of space is playing havoc with our instruments," Rodriguez reported. His voice carried the frustration of a man who prided himself on understanding every bolt and circuit on the ship. "It's like the very fabric of space-time is different here." Marcus nodded, his weathered face showing the strain of command. 52. He had led dozens of exploration missions, but nothing had prepared him for this. The New Horizon carried a crew of 43 souls, and their safety weighed heavily on his shoulders. "Any luck raising Earth Command, Chen?" "Negative, sir. I'm picking up something, though. There are artificial signals out there, but they're unlike anything in our databases. The patterns are too complex to be random, but I can't decode them." Chen's fingers danced across her controls, her young face illuminated by the soft glow of her screens. Dr. Harrison looked up from his instruments, his gray hair disheveled from hours of work. "Captain, you need to see this. The quantum signatures I'm detecting suggest we're not just lost. We're in a region of space that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of physics. The energy readings are off the charts." Before Marcus could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began wailing. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing something that left the entire bridge crew speechless. Ahead of them, stretching across the starfield like a massive crystal flower, was a structure so large it dwarfed entire star systems. Delicate spires twisted through space, connected by bridges of pure light that pulsed with rainbow colors. "Mother of God," whispered Navigator Thompson, a man not easily impressed after 20 years in space. "That thing must be thousands of kilometers across. How is it even possible?" "It's beautiful," Chen breathed, her communication duties momentarily forgotten. The structure seemed to sing to them through the vacuum of space, its harmonious patterns creating an almost hypnotic effect. Marcus felt his command training kick in despite his awe. "All stop. Chen, try to establish communication. Harrison, I want a full sensor sweep. Rodriguez, prepare the ship for anything. We don't know if this is friendly or hostile." As if responding to his words, the space around the New Horizon suddenly filled with ships. Not the angular, functional designs of human engineering, but flowing organic shapes that seemed grown rather than built. They moved with impossible grace, surrounding the human vessel in a complex formation that was clearly deliberate, but not overtly threatening. "Captain, incoming transmission," Chen announced, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "It's in Standard Galactic Common." "Standard Galactic what?" Marcus asked, but Chen was already putting the signal through the main speakers. A voice filled the bridge, melodious and alien, speaking in perfect English that somehow felt translated. "Unknown vessel, you have entered the sovereign space of the Zephyrian Empire. State your origin and purpose. Your ship design is not recognized in our databases." Marcus stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture of authority and calm. "This is Captain Marcus Reed of the Earth vessel New Horizon. We are explorers from the planet Earth, currently lost due to navigation system failures. We mean no harm and request assistance." A long pause followed, filled only by the hum of the ship's systems. When the alien voice returned, it carried a note of something that might have been excitement. "Earth vessel, maintain your position. Do not attempt to flee or take aggressive action. You will be escorted to the Imperial Court for audience with the High Council. This is a great honor that has not been granted to any species in over 1,000 cycles." "Imperial Court?" Rodriguez muttered. "These guys don't mess around with titles." The alien ships began moving in perfect synchronization, creating a corridor of light that led toward the massive structure. As they approached, details became visible that defied imagination. Gardens floated in space, their plants glowing with bioluminescent light. Waterfalls cascaded from one level to another in defiance of gravity. Beings that might have been people or might have been living art moved along transparent walkways that connected the various spires. "Captain," Dr. Harrison said softly, "I'm reading life signs throughout that structure. Millions of them. This isn't just a space station, it's a city, maybe an entire civilization." As they drew closer, more ships joined their escort. Each vessel was unique, representing dozens of different design philosophies and possibly different species. The diversity was overwhelming. Some ships looked like sailing vessels made of crystallized starlight. Others resembled living creatures with wings that caught and reflected the cosmic radiation around them. "Chen, are you recording all of this?" Marcus asked. "Every second, sir. Though I'm not sure anyone back home will believe it." The New Horizon was guided into a docking bay that could have housed a dozen ships their size. As the docking clamps engaged, Marcus felt the subtle vibration that indicated a solid connection. Gravity generators hummed to life, providing Earth-normal conditions in the bay around them. "Atmospheric readings show breathable air outside," reported Dr. Harrison. "Oxygen, nitrogen, trace gases. It's remarkably similar to Earth-normal." A delegation was waiting for them as they disembarked. The beings that greeted them were humanoid but clearly not human. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs and skin that shifted color like oil on water. Their faces were elegant and angular, with large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. They wore robes that appeared to be woven from captured starlight. The leader of the delegation stepped forward and spoke in that same melodious voice they had heard over the radio. "Welcome, travelers from Earth. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your arrival has been anticipated." "Anticipated?" Marcus asked, extending his hand in greeting. The ambassador looked at the gesture curiously before extending his own hand, which had 6 fingers and felt surprisingly warm. "Indeed. But such matters are best discussed in the presence of the High Council. Please, follow me. Your ship will be cared for in your absence." As they walked through corridors that seemed to be carved from single pieces of crystal, Ambassador Veltar explained the basics of their situation. The Zephyrian Empire was ancient, spanning multiple star systems and comprising dozens of different species. They had achieved a level of technological and social advancement that made them the dominant power in this region of the galaxy. "However," Veltar continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "we face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our civilization. Our emperor, who has ruled for over 3,000 years, is dying. The succession has been complicated." They entered a vast chamber where beings of every conceivable shape and size gathered in floating seats arranged in complex geometric patterns. At the center, on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive diamond, sat a figure that radiated both incredible age and immense power. This was Emperor Zephyron, the immortal ruler of the greatest empire in known space. But as Marcus looked closer, he could see that immortal was perhaps too strong a word. The Emperor's skin had a translucent quality, and his movements were slow and deliberate. He was clearly ancient beyond measure, and the weight of eons pressed down upon him like a visible burden. "Approach, children of Earth," the Emperor said, his voice carrying across the chamber without amplification. "Your arrival fulfills an ancient prophecy, though perhaps not in the way our seers expected." Marcus and his crew walked forward, trying to maintain their dignity while gawking at the incredible assembly around them. Floating jellyfish-like beings pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Crystalline entities that looked like living gemstones reflected light in prismatic displays. Beings that appeared to be made of pure energy flickered in and out of visible existence. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, attempting a formal bow. "We are honored by your welcome, though I must confess we are confused by your mention of prophecy. We are simple explorers who became lost in space." A sound that might have been laughter echoed through the chamber. Simple explorers, yes, but also something more. Tell me, Captain Marcus Reed of Earth, what do you know of the Star Wanderer prophecy? Marcus looked to his crew, seeing his own confusion reflected in their faces. Nothing, Your Majesty. This is our first contact with any non-human intelligence. Fascinating, the Emperor mused. Dr. Harrison approached. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, clearly surprised to be singled out. Your Majesty? You are a seeker of knowledge, are you not? One who questions the nature of reality itself? Yes, Your Majesty. I'm a physicist and xenobiologist. And you, Chief Rodriguez, you shape matter and energy to serve your will, creating order from chaos? Rodriguez nodded slowly. I'm an engineer, Your Majesty. I fix things and build things. Lieutenant Chen, you speak across the void, connecting distant minds and hearts? I'm a communications officer, Chen replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The Emperor's ancient eyes seemed to look through them to something beyond. The prophecy speaks of the Star Wanderers who will come from the void between galaxies. They will be led by a warrior scholar who commands without conquering. With him will come the seeker of truth, the shaper of reality, and the voice between worlds. Together they will face the trials of leadership and prove that power shared is power multiplied. A murmur ran through the assembled beings, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. Ambassador Veltar stepped forward, his color-shifting skin now displaying patterns of gold and silver. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to suggest— I suggest nothing, the Emperor replied firmly. I state what is. These beings have fulfilled the conditions of the prophecy. They have traveled from beyond our known space. They possess the described attributes, and they have arrived at the moment of our greatest need. Marcus felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. Your Majesty, with respect, we're not wanderers, or whatever the prophecy describes. We're lost explorers who just want to find our way home. Home, the Emperor repeated softly. Yes, that is always the heart of the matter, isn't it? But sometimes, Captain Reed, we find that home is not a place we return to, but a place we create. The Emperor gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed a complex family tree with dozens of branches, but many of the branches were crossed out or marked with symbols that clearly indicated death or disqualification. For 3 millennia, I have ruled this empire through wisdom, strength, and the support of the people. But I am dying, and with my death comes chaos. The traditional succession laws require an heir who can pass the trials of ascension. 3. Trials that test the mind, the heart, and the will. The display zoomed in on a section showing recent events. My direct heirs have all failed these trials or died in the attempt. The noble houses scheme against each other, preparing for civil war. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds wait to see if our civilization will survive my passing. Dr. Harrison stepped forward. Your Majesty, surely there must be someone in your empire capable of leadership. Capable, yes. Willing to unite rather than divide, that is the question. The prophecy states that the Star Wanderers will not take power for themselves but will show us a new way forward. A way that preserves our unity while acknowledging that times change, and old ways must sometimes give way to new. Marcus realized where this was heading and didn't like it one bit. Your Majesty, we're not qualified to rule an empire. We don't understand your laws, your customs, your people. Exactly, the Emperor said with satisfaction. You have no existing loyalties to any faction, no ancient grudges or family obligations that would bias your judgment. You come to us as observers, able to see solutions that we, in our closeness to the problems, cannot see. Ambassador Veltar's skin now displayed patterns of deep purple, which Marcus was beginning to interpret as concern or worry. Your Majesty, the Council has not formally approved this interpretation of the prophecy. The Council will have their chance to voice their opinions, the Emperor replied. But first, our guests must understand what is truly at stake here. The holographic display changed, showing images of the Empire at its height. Peaceful worlds where different species lived and worked together. Scientific achievements that pushed the boundaries of knowledge. Art and culture that elevated the spirit. trade and prosperity that ensured no world wanted for necessities. This is what we have built over millennia, the emperor explained. But it is fragile. Without strong, unified leadership, the noble houses will tear it apart fighting over the pieces. Trillions of beings will suffer. Countless worlds will fall into darkness and chaos. Then the display showed possible futures. Worlds in flames. Refugee fleets fleeing dying systems. The great stations and cities reduced to ruins. Species that had thrived under imperial protection, driven to extinction by warfare and neglect. This is what we face without a solution to our succession crisis. Lieutenant Chen spoke up, her voice small but determined. What exactly would you need us to do? The Emperor's ancient face showed something that might have been hope. Face them. Trials of ascension. Not to become Emperor yourselves, but to prove that the qualities required for leadership can exist in unexpected forms. To show our people that cooperation and fresh thinking can solve problems that traditional approaches cannot. And if we refuse, Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer, then you are free to go, the Emperor said simply. We will provide your ship with navigation data to return to your home space, but understand that your refusal may doom billions of innocent beings to centuries of warfare and suffering. The weight of the choice settled on the humans like a physical burden. Marcus looked at his crew, seeing his own mixture of fear and determination reflected in their faces. They were explorers who had signed up for adventure and discovery, not to hold the fate of galactic civilizations in their hands. But they were also human. And humans, throughout their history, had consistently made the choice to help others, even when it meant personal risk and sacrifice. The reluctant claimants. The quarters provided for the human delegation were luxurious beyond anything they had ever experienced, but Marcus Reed couldn't enjoy the comfort. He stood on the balcony overlooking the central spire of the Imperial complex, watching the flow of beings from dozens of different species going about their daily lives hundreds of meters below. Dr. Harrison joined him, carrying 2 cups of something that tasted remarkably like coffee, but glowed faintly blue. The Emperor's physicians examined our biological data, he said quietly. They confirmed that we can survive the trials, though they won't tell us exactly what that means. Marcus accepted the cup gratefully. Any word from Rodriguez and Chen? They're meeting with some kind of engineering council. Apparently one of the trials involves solving a technological challenge that's been stumped their best minds for centuries. Harrison paused, sipping his drink. Marcus, I've been thinking about what the Emperor said, about home being something we create rather than return to. You're having second thoughts about going back to Earth? I'm having thoughts about what back to Earth even means now. We've seen things that will change everything about how humanity views its place in the universe. We can't just pretend this never happened. Before Marcus could respond, Ambassador Veltar materialized on the balcony in a shimmer of transported light. The Zephyrian's skin was cycling through worried patterns of deep blue and silver. Captain Reed, we have a problem. Several of the noble houses have learned of your presence and the Emperor's interpretation of the prophecy. They are not pleased. I imagine not, Marcus said dryly. Having a bunch of aliens show up and potentially claim the throne probably wasn't in their political plans. The situation is more complex than that. House Mordak and House Zilthan have formed an alliance. They're claiming that the prophecy is being misinterpreted to deny them their rightful claims to succession. They've demanded that the traditional trials be held immediately with their champions competing against you. Dr. Harrison set down his cup with shaking hands. Champions? This is starting to sound like medieval combat. The trials of ascension are not combat in the traditional sense, Veltar explained, though his tone wasn't entirely reassuring. They test different aspects of leadership. The trial of mind challenges intellectual capacity and problem-solving ability. The trial of heart tests empathy, wisdom, and moral judgment. The trial of will examines determination and the ability to make difficult decisions under pressure. And if we fail? Marcus asked. Failure in the trials traditionally means death or exile. However, Given your unique status, the Emperor has indicated that failure would simply mean your immediate return to your home space with no further obligations. How generous, Marcus muttered. What about success? What happens if we somehow pass these trials? Veltar's skin shifted to patterns that might have indicated embarrassment. That is where the situation becomes unprecedented. The prophecy suggests that the Star Wanderers will show a new way forward. The exact interpretation of this has been debated by scholars for centuries. Lieutenant Chen and Chief Rodriguez joined them on the balcony, both looking overwhelmed by their recent experiences. Chen carried a datapad filled with information about Imperial communication networks, while Rodriguez held what appeared to be a crystalline device that pulsed with inner light. Captain, Chen reported, I've been learning about their information systems. It's incredible. They have instantaneous communication across their entire empire, connecting billions of different minds and cultures. But there are problems. Some species can't interface with others due to biological incompatibilities. Messages get lost in translation. There are entire worlds that are effectively isolated because they can't communicate properly with the central government. Rodriguez held up his device. And I've been looking at their engineering challenges. This thing is supposed to be a universal matter converter, but it's been malfunctioning for over 200 years. They've got brilliant individual species, but they can't seem to work together effectively on complex problems. Everyone has their own way of doing things. Dr. Harrison looked thoughtful. It sounds like they have the same problems we've always had on Earth, just on a galactic scale. Different groups with different strengths but struggling to communicate and cooperate effectively. Which might be exactly why we're here, Marcus realized. We're not just being asked to rule an empire. We're being asked to solve the fundamental problem of how different species and cultures can work together. Ambassador Veltar's skin displayed patterns of golden approval. You begin to understand. The empire has achieved greatness through diversity, but that same diversity threatens to tear it apart without proper leadership. When do these trials begin? Marcus asked. Tomorrow. The noble houses have insisted on immediate action, claiming that delay will be seen as weakness by the outer worlds. The Emperor has agreed, though he has also arranged for certain accommodations to be made for your unique situation. That evening, the human crew gathered in Marcus's quarters to discuss their decision. The room was spacious enough to hold a small conference with furniture that adapted automatically to their human proportions. I keep thinking about my daughter back on Earth, Chen said quietly. She's only 8 years old. If we do this, if we get involved in their politics, we might never see our families again. Rodriguez nodded grimly. My wife is expecting our first child. I promised her I'd be back before the birth. Dr. Harrison leaned forward in his chair. But if we don't do this, how many children across this empire will never have the chance to grow up in peace? How many families will be torn apart by the civil war that everyone seems to think is inevitable? Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the incredible vista of the Imperial complex. Beings from hundreds of different worlds moved through the spires and gardens, living their lives under the protection of an empire that had brought peace and prosperity for millennia. I've been in command positions for most of my adult life, he said finally. I've learned that sometimes you have to make decisions that affect people you've never met, people who will never know your name or understand the choice you made for them. He turned back to his crew. But I've also learned that the best decisions are made by teams, not individuals. So we vote. All of us. Whatever we decide together. Chen was the first to speak. I vote yes. I want to see my daughter again. But I also want her to live in a universe where different people can work together instead of fighting each other. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. My father always told me that a real engineer doesn't just fix things for himself. He fixes things so they stay fixed for the people who come after him. I vote yes. Dr. Harrison smiled. I became a scientist to understand the universe and help make life better for everyone in it. This might be the most important research project I'll ever be involved in. Yes. Marcus nodded. Then it's unanimous. Tomorrow we face the trials. Not because we want to rule an empire, but because we want to prove that cooperation and understanding can solve problems that seem impossible. The next morning, the grand amphitheater of the Imperial complex was filled to capacity. Beings from across the Empire had gathered to witness the trials, while countless more watched through the instantaneous communication networks that connected every world in Imperial space. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering, a circular space surrounded by floating platforms that could accommodate the wildly different physiological needs of various species. At the center stood 3 pedestals, each one representing one of the traditional trials. Emperor Zephyron entered with ceremony befitting his ancient status, but Marcus could see that the effort was costing him. The immortal ruler was clearly nearing the end of his incredibly long life. Citizens of the Empire, the Emperor's voice carried clearly to every corner of the amphitheater. Today, we witness trials that will determine our future. The noble houses have put forward their champions, as is their right. But we also have unexpected contestants, visitors from beyond our borders who may fulfill an ancient prophecy. The champions of houses Mordak and Zilthan were impressive specimens. Mordak's champion was a being that looked like it was carved from living stone, 12 feet tall and radiating physical power. Zilthan's champion was more elegant, a crystalline entity that seemed to bend light around itself and whose thoughts moved at superhuman speeds. "The first trial begins now," announced the ceremonial judge, a being so ancient and alien that Marcus couldn't even determine what species it might originally have been. The Trial of Mind. A holographic puzzle materialized above the central pedestal, 3-dimensional and constantly shifting. It appeared to be some kind of navigational problem involving multiple star systems and complex gravitational interactions. The stone champion began working immediately, its massive hands manipulating control interfaces with surprising delicacy. The crystalline champion's approach was different, its entire body flickering as it processed calculations at incredible speed. Dr. Harrison stepped forward to represent the humans. Marcus felt a moment of doubt. How could a human scientist compete with beings whose entire species might have evolved for intellectual pursuits? But Harrison surprised him. Instead of trying to match the raw computational power of his competitors, he began asking questions. What's the purpose of this navigation route? Are we trying to optimize for speed, fuel efficiency, or safety? Are there political considerations like avoiding certain territories? The judge's ancient features showed something that might have been approval. Elaborate on your reasoning, human. The puzzle has multiple valid solutions depending on the priorities, Harrison explained. The stone champion is optimizing for the most direct route. The crystalline champion is calculating the most mathematically elegant path. But without understanding the context, who is traveling, why they're traveling, what resources they have available, we can't determine the best solution. And what solution do you propose? Harrison manipulated the controls, creating a route that was neither the fastest nor the most elegant, but which passed through 3 different systems that appeared to be in distress. This route takes longer, but it allows the traveler to provide assistance to systems in need while reaching their destination. It turns a simple journey into an opportunity to strengthen the Empire. The other champions had completed their calculations, presenting mathematically perfect solutions that solved the puzzle as stated, but Harrison had questioned the assumptions underlying the puzzle itself. The trial of mind is complete, the judge announced. The human Harrison has demonstrated that true intelligence lies not just in finding answers, but in asking the right questions. The crowd erupted in discussion, thousands of different voices creating a symphony of reaction that the translation system struggled to process. Marcus could see surprise, approval, and concern in the body language of various species. The second trial begins now, the trial of heart. This time, the challenge was more abstract. Holographic scenarios played out showing various moral dilemmas faced by imperial leaders throughout history. Each champion was asked to judge the situations and explain their reasoning. Lieutenant Chen stepped forward for this trial. Marcus was initially worried. She was the youngest member of their crew with less life experience than the others. But as the scenarios played out, he realized that her youth might actually be an advantage. The moral dilemmas were complex, involving conflicts between different species values, resource allocation during crises, and decisions about intervention in the affairs of member worlds. The other champions provided answers based on established imperial law and precedent. Chen's approach was different. In every one of these scenarios, the key issue is communication, she observed. The problems arise because different groups aren't really listening to each other. They're talking past each other, making assumptions about what others want or need. She manipulated the holographic controls to show alternative versions of each scenario. In this resource allocation crisis, instead of the Emperor making a unilateral decision, what-if representatives from each affected world worked together to find a solution that addressed everyone's needs? It might take longer, but the result would be more stable and fair. And this intervention dilemma, instead of choosing between respecting planetary autonomy and preventing suffering, what if the Empire offered multiple forms of assistance and let the planet choose what kind of help they wanted? The judge considered her responses carefully. You suggest that the heart of leadership lies not in making decisions for others, but in facilitating their ability to make decisions for themselves? I suggest that the best solutions come when everyone affected has a voice in creating them, Chen replied. A leader's job isn't to have all the answers, but to make sure all the right questions get asked and all the relevant voices get heard. The trial of heart is complete. The human Chen has demonstrated that true compassion lies not in imposing one's will, but in empowering others to find their own paths. Now came the final trial, and Marcus knew it would fall to him. The trial of will was traditionally the most dangerous, testing a leader's ability to make difficult decisions under extreme pressure. The scenario that materialized was a perfect representation of the Empire's current crisis. A holographic version of the Imperial complex appeared, but under siege. Multiple factions fought for control while civilian populations suffered. The champion had to choose which factions to support, which compromises to make, and how to restore order. The Stone Champion chose the most direct approach, supporting the strongest faction and using military force to crush opposition. It was efficient but left much of the population resentful and rebellious. The Crystalline Champion calculated the most logical compromise, dividing territory and resources based on complex algorithms that satisfied no one completely, but prevented total war. When Marcus's turn came, he surprised everyone by refusing to choose any of the presented options. This entire scenario is based on the assumption that someone has to win and someone has to lose, he said. But what if we change the fundamental structure of the problem? He manipulated the holographic controls, but instead of choosing sides or dividing territory, he began connecting the various factions through communication networks and shared projects. Instead of fighting over who gets to rule, what if we create a system where everyone has a role in governance? The military faction has expertise in security and logistics. The merchant faction understands economics and trade. The scholar faction has knowledge and wisdom. Instead of seeing these as competing groups, we treat them as complementary parts of a larger whole. The judge's ancient voice carried a note of curiosity. You would abandon the traditional imperial structure entirely? I would evolve it, Marcus replied. The Empire has grown too large and complex for any single individual or small group to govern effectively, but it doesn't have to be governed by a single individual. What if the Emperor's role became more like a facilitator and coordinator, helping different groups work together instead of ruling over them? And how would decisions be made in this system? Through councils representing different constituencies, worlds, species, professions, age groups, whatever makes sense for each issue. Complex problems would be solved by the people who understand them best, with the imperial government providing support and coordination rather than top-down control. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus had essentially proposed the dissolution of the imperial system that had existed for millennia, replacing it with something unprecedented in galactic history. Emperor Zephyron himself rose from his throne, his ancient form moving with surprising grace. The trials are complete. The champions have all demonstrated their abilities and approaches. Now comes the judgment. The Emperor's voice carried across the amphitheater and to every world in the Empire simultaneously. The noble champions showed strength and intelligence. As expected, they would have ruled as emperors have always ruled, with power concentrated in their hands and decisions flowing from their will. But the humans have shown us something different. They have demonstrated that true leadership lies not in commanding others, but in helping others find their own strength. They have suggested that our ancient systems, while successful, may have reached the limits of their effectiveness. The Emperor gestured, and the holographic displays changed to show real-time images from across the Empire. Worlds at peace, species working together, the incredible diversity and achievements of galactic civilization. For 3,000 years, I have carried the burden of billions of lives on my shoulders. It has been an honor and a privilege, but it has also been a weight that no single being should bear alone. The humans proposed something that our ancestors never imagined: shared leadership, distributed authority, government by cooperation rather than domination. Marcus stepped forward. Your Majesty, we're not suggesting that you abandon your role. We're suggesting that you transform it. Instead of ruling over the Empire, you could guide its transformation into something even greater. A true federation where every species, every world, every individual has a voice in shaping their common future. The Emperor's ancient eyes seemed to look through time itself, seeing possibilities that others could not imagine. And you would help implement this transformation? If you'll have us, Marcus replied. Not as rulers, but as advisors, facilitators, bridges between different ways of thinking. We've learned as much from you in the past few days as you might learn from us in years to come. The prophecy spoke of star wanderers who would show a new way forward, the Emperor mused. I confess I expected conquerors or traditional rulers. I did not expect teachers. The vote, when it came, was not the formal declaration of a new emperor that everyone had expected. Instead, it was approval for a radical experiment in governance that would transform the Empire into something unprecedented, a truly cooperative galactic civilization. The transition took years to implement, but the humans stayed to help, serving as advisors and facilitators while new systems of government were established. They introduced concepts of democratic representation, rotating leadership, and distributed decision-making that allowed the Empire to maintain unity while embracing its diversity. Chen developed communication protocols that allowed different species to participate meaningfully in government regardless of their biological limitations. Rodriguez designed new technologies that could be operated and maintained by cooperative teams from multiple species. Harrison established research networks that shared knowledge freely across all member worlds. Marcus found himself in the unique position of being the last person anyone expected to wield power, which made him incredibly effective at helping others find their own power. He became known as the Facilitator Prime, a role that had never existed before but quickly became essential to the new system. Years later, when the New Horizon finally returned to Earth, it carried not just the crew that had left, but also ambassadors from dozens of species and an invitation for humanity to join the transformed Empire as full participants rather than subjects. Dr. Harrison stood on the bridge of their ship as Earth grew larger in the view screen, but his attention was focused on the datapads containing years of scientific discoveries and cultural exchanges. You know, we never did find our way home. Marcus smiled, looking out at the blue marble that had been humanity's entire universe such a short time ago. No, we didn't. We found something better. We found a way to make home big enough for everyone. Story of the humans who accidentally invaded an empire and ended up transforming it became legend throughout the galaxy. But for Marcus Reed and his crew, it was simply what happened when people chose cooperation over conquest, understanding over domination, and shared strength over individual power. In the end, they had proven that sometimes the greatest victories come not from taking the throne, but from helping others realize they never needed to be ruled in the first place.